For me, being an indigenous is something that I'm proud of. It's not something that makes me less or makes me better person. It's just a status. Like back home, it's like really hard to be an indigenous, especially in the capital, because most of the people are not indigenous, and as an indigenous, you face a lot of racism and discrimination, like by many people. Like it doesn't really matter like which class are they. It matters more the fact that I'm indigenous and they are not. And I feel like growing up in the capital city as an indigenous, like with my customs, with my language, and with an indigenous name, it like I'm like the the center at some point of discrimination and loss. And it was like a moment in my life when I wanted to give up because there's a lot, and as a kid you don't understand why you are different, and the kids around you, they don't understand as well, like the difference in you. It's just that as like as a family they know that you are different, they don't know why, and they don't want to know why. It's just like as a kid they replied more of the things that they know that their parents does to other indigenous people. They're like kind of a generalization about how an indigenous is. Like indigenous people are stupid, are they just know to work as assholes because they don't understand the point of things. They just do whatever you tell them, and they can't speak Spanish without an indigenous accent. It's not even like an accent by region, it's an indigenous accent as they call it. Like no, don't knowing how to conjugate verbs and stuff like that. It's like a way to know if you're indigenous or not, even if like you don't dress up like as an indigenous, even if your name is not indigenous. They know for the color of your skin and the way you talk that you're indigenous, and for your last name as well. But for me it was like I don't actually look as an indigenous, like I'm more white than I should be, but I'm not like I'm like in the middle of the color skin of both of them. And it was like if you see me, like, you don't know where to allocate me, but my name, my costumes, my language, and the way that I act with people, it shows them that I'm indigenous, and that most of the time give me a treatment like totally different from other people. Like I don't know, it's kind of hard, and I'm really glad that my father showed me to appreciate my culture, not because I'm different, because like we grew we grew up like in a really indigenous family where we talk our indigenous language with each other. Like my father he tried to show us as much as he could about indigenous stuff. Even if we grew up in the capital city, we continue to speak our language, and that doesn't happen with many families back home. um, I don't know, the belief that you don't give to people waiting for something back, or you give to people after they give you something. It's just a belief to give to people because they are people as well, and you never know when they can actually help you or help other people. So the best way to have like a good relationship within all the community is always give people like whatever you have. Don't like hesitate. What do you have? It's just I don't know, like I don't know, like in indigenous families back home, they're like the rate of poverty is really really high. It's higher than the non-indigenous. Well, back home the rate of poverty in indigenous people is greater than the non-indigenous, and that makes like a huge difference in the quality of life. But for an indigenous person, it's show that you need to give whatever do you have to like the people you're kind of hosting or they visit you. You don't keep the good stuff for yourself. You try to keep the good stuff you have for everyone else. Like, it's not the same with the non-indigenous, that they give you what they don't want. Well, at least back home. I don't know how it's in other countries, but back home is like the most common, and that's kind of a tradition as well. Um, for example, I grew up in the capital city, and I want like, I don't know, like to kind of ceremonies, like I don't know, weddings or stuff like that for non-indigenous people, because like the people around me weren't indigenous, and it's mostly paid by the family who's hosting the event. But in an indigenous community, like if someone is getting married, everyone will give a quantity of money, because everyone will eat there, everyone will enjoy the party, and everyone it's contributed to the formation of a new house, of a new home. So it's kind of different, like we take care more about the community instead of an individual, or instead of just my family. My family, it gets to everyone. Like, for example, in the morning, well, when I'm in an indigenous community, I say good morning dad to my father, and I say good morning dad to my neighbor, and I say good morning dad to my uncle. Like, the respect that they receive is the same, because they're older, they're more wisdom than I am, and I need to respect that difference. And the difference between the treatment is when I'm talking about them as, yeah, he's my dad, he's my neighbor, he's my uncle. But when I talking to them, it's the same kind of respect that I need to show. And well, traditions were like, we as indigenous communities, the way that we get income is mostly about crops. Uh, so when you start a new crop, you need to pay an offer. Not pay, like offer like something to the earth in order to have like good energies, like side by side, and having a good crop and not hurting the earth or the soil. And when you get your crop, you need to be thankful for that, and you invite the community to your house to drink, even if it's just a cup of coffee. You need to show how glad you are, not just with your family, not just with the community, because it's the people around you who will help you if you need help. And well, we as indigenous communities, we try to like know what do we have around us, and most of the indigenous communities are in rural areas, like really deep in, like with a lot of forest around them, and it's like really away from like urbanized places. So it's like kind of easy to get some certain kind of plants that are medicinal. Like, well, at least my mom, she gets a bunch of them before we get home, when we are visiting, when we used to visit my grandmother, because she knew that it's better to use plants that you know that they work, instead of pills that are going to contaminate your body with chemicals, and you don't know what can be the reactions. But well, each plant has a name, and it, as an indigenous, you grew up with that, so you get to differentiate each one of them, and each one of them has a different name. But in Spanish, we don't we can't actually translate what we are looking for when we go like to a supermarket or stuff like that, because they're different for us, for like some little difference, but they're classified as the same thing. Like, I don't know, in a supermarket, like, or even like in the market street. So it's like, for me, it was kind of hard when I learned Spanish, because I went to the school with 4 years old, and the only language that I could speak it was my indigenous language, which is totally different from Spanish. I grew up listening to the songs and having people speaking Spanish around me, but I actually never spoke Spanish before that. So my mom gave to my teacher a list about the things that I could say and what they meant. Like, for example, I need to go to the bathroom, or I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or I want my mom. Like, some basic phrases. My teacher was really open, so she tried to learn as much as she could during the first week to understand me. And I understood everything what she said to me, but I couldn't communicate back what I wanted to say. So it was really, really hard. And I remember my classmates, they used to say that I speak English, because that was the only language that they knew it was different from Spanish. And I think that at some point traumatized me, and that's why I don't like English. And when I came here, I didn't speak English because I never liked it, and I never put like effort to learn it. But yes, it's really necessary here. I don't know, like, grammatically it's really similar to English, because we don't have, like, in Spanish, like, the things they don't have gender. It's like the same thing. It's like it and re are the same thing, like, to name things. And for example, well, because of that, like, we can say that the language is not feminist, like, it's sexist, because we don't have gender. And I don't know, well, I feel like speaking an indigenous language back home, it's, well, when it's the only language that you can speak, it's like really limiting. But if you are non-indigenous and you speak one, it's because you're a really well-known person, and it's because, like, you have a lot of money to learn something that is not useful at all for many people. And as an indigenous, if you can speak Spanish but you don't speak it real well, it's because you're stupid. So I don't know, it's kind of hard to say that. Like, for we get a lot of tourists from North America especially, and they try to learn Spanish, but you can't learn like a perfect Spanish in a couple of weeks. But the non-indigenous people, they try like to correct them, and yeah, for you, it's your second language, and you just try to learn that because you are with here and you want to enjoy it, and blah blah blah. They're like really empathic with people. But when an indigenous person is talking in Spanish, like, with the same kind of mistakes, it's totally different. It's like, oh yeah, you don't know how to speak Spanish because you're stupid, because you cannot learn something that you should learn. Like, it's not their fault. Like, our education system is not bilingual, and if you're indigenous, you need to speak Spanish in order to go to school, otherwise you can't. And many kids, they really want to go to school, and they go like for the first couple of years and they give up because they don't understand what the teacher is saying. And it's not because they don't understand or they don't have like the understanding of stuff. It's just because the way that they teach them is not the right one. a rate of, I don't know how to call it in English, but when you just give up about something and you just like leave it, like the first grade is really really high, and the um, the education, like the part of the government that is in charge of education, the education part, lost a lot of money because of that. And well, many people is trying to encourage bilingual schools so they wouldn't lose it, that huge amount of money that can be used in another stuff, like I don't know, healthy, or even the same education but like improve the quality. But it's kind of hard to like try to the non-indigenous people understand that if you're learning something that is not your first language when you're 7 years old, it's impossible. It's like, I don't know, maybe because we don't have empathy, or the non-indigenous people is not actually encouraged and engaged with learning just a little bit about indigenous communities. Maybe that's we don't have something that unified us as a country. More than a country, I see that we are a group of people called indigenous and non-indigenous. Like, we are not Guatemalans, we are indigenous and non-indigenous from Guatemala. But it's not the same. Like, we should try to learn a bit about both cultures. And that's what we do when the colonizers came. Like, we were, as indigenous, we were killed, we were sclavicide, and just because we were different. But at the end, now you see how much syncretism we have back home. Like, there are many indigenous communities where, for Eastern, you found, I don't know, we have like kind of processions when there is Jesus going in the streets, and behind him is Mashimon, which is like his like brother, but his Mashimon is like it's the total opposite of Jesus, but it's an indigenous representation, kind of. Or you go to many churches like in indigenous communities and you will find the signs dress up as indigenous or with indigenous costumes. So like that syncretism, you cannot avoid it. And the same happened with the non-indigenous people, that many of our regionalisms talking in Spanish in Guatemala, they come from indigenous words, but they don't even realize. It's, I feel it's just that we don't realize that we are actually becoming just one culture, but at the same time we are like putting more like walls between us. I don't know, I feel like we just need to realize like how similar are becoming our traditions as indigenous and non-indigenous, and how we like put more walls between us just because I want to be better than you. So yes, yeah, let's see what happened in a couple of years. Right now they're trying to put as a mandatory second language in the whole country, so as a non-indigenous you need to learn an indigenous language from your region. And if you're indigenous, you could have the opportunity to show that you can be actually good at something. So